All right, guys, I am back for the second part of the reading for today to celebrate the release of my first in a trilogy, Ronald the Ronin, book one of A Servant's Creed. And you can see I have a little microphone change. While this is not a katana, it is a sword. I would love a katana. I think one of you should convince either my publisher or, maybe the kindness of your hearts to get me one. Don't tell my wife, though. But anyway, this is going to be the second reading for the day to celebrate my book release today. And like I said in the first one, Ronald the Ronin is a young adult samurai fantasy, primarily set in real world adjacent spaces, but it has portal hopping where the main characters are able to move through different planes of existences that I've called islands. So in this one, as we got to know in the prologue, the main other island is Shimagodetsusha, the island of the usurpers, and that is where a lot of the action takes place. That's where the antagonist stays, and that's where Ronald has to contend with a lot of the trauma and the PTSD from his childhood and from things that go wrong. That's sort of the origin of it all. So he tries to run from it, blah blah blah. He is pretending to be able to stay just in the real world, and it just doesn't work for him. It's a great tromp, a lot of action, a lot of dealing with these post-traumatic um, issues that he has as he is also trying to navigate being a high schooler and all that good stuff. So, without further ado, I will read chapter one of Ronald the Ronin, and I hope you guys enjoy. The basement was a hazy blue gray, and two samurai looked like ghosts as they approached their family shrine. In their matching black and purple do, and as of yet unadorned kabuto, the warriors were nearly indistinguishable from one another. One stood several inches higher and walked with the gait of experience, but their path to Hachiman, Shinto god of war and their family's chosen patron deity, was coldly coordinated, flawlessly executed, as if they were one body and mind. It was all a part of the ritual, taught to them over long years of training through blood, sweat, and failure, all leading to this very moment. After today, they would no longer be among the uninitiated. After today, they would become true samurai, and a world of order secrets would be opened unto them. If they succeeded, at least. If they failed, shame and death could be the only outcomes. An old man with a thin mustache and pointy beard watched from the bottom of the stairs, arms folded across his chest, sallow eyes squinted. He was wearing simple robes and sandals, but tight muscles and thick scars visible from beneath the loose fabric showed him to be no stranger to the warrior's path. He had been here before, taking these same first steps, and come out triumphant. He expected the same from his sons. No less than perfection would satisfy the elder samurai. The two young samurai in training, Hiro and Ronald Hashimoto by age, stopped before the shrine, bowed their heads in reverence to Hachiman, and kneeled hands on their knees. A warm draft wafted through the basement, kicking up dust and old memories, scattering the cherry blossom leaves sprinkled across the floor in a swirl of pink and white. The old man stifled a cough, but his sons remained statue still, their dual swords, one long, one short, resting upon their laps as they listened for the whispers of their ancestors to guide their path. The older boy leaned forwards, raised to half height, and plucked an ornamented tanto from Hachiman's outstretched hands. It was an unwieldy, overly showy artifact, not suited for any other purpose than ceremony. The samurai slipped their hands free and took turns drawing the blade across their palms. Blood trickled onto the floor, mixing with dirt, spreading to the base of the shrine, encircling it in a rusty, crimson ring. It flowed like rainwater in a stream, drawing an intricate circular pattern in the dirt, their family crest. The samurai replaced the dagger, and Hachiman accepted its return with silent gratitude before the entire shrine began to fold in on itself. All around them, floorboards peeled apart, a deep rumbling pulsed through the house's foundation, and a stairway swiveled open beneath the shrine, a waft of stale, musty air filling the room. A torrent of suffocating air swirled through the basement, and they bowed to Hachiman once more before descending into the dark opening. The shorter boy hesitated, risked a single glance back at the old samurai impatiently watching, and took a deep breath. The older turned, rested a reassuring hand on his shoulder, and they both disappeared beneath the shrine. The old man watched intently, showing no emotion on his stoic face. This was the way of things. This was their destiny, and he had long since done his part to ensure their success. It was up to them now. His sons were bound for greatness, if only they were willing to accept their fate. The floorboards slid back into place, the shrine rematerialized one plank at a time, and Hachiman stood as staunch and silent as ever. One last swirl, one last pink swirl of leaves blew past before the basement fell into utter stillness once again. The haze cleared and light burst forth from the shrine. A school of translucent glowing carp appeared from Hachiman's chest, swimming lazy laps around the basement. They bounced from workbench to storage shelf, wriggled beneath the furnace and around a stack of dusty, rotting boxes, casting shimmering reflections upon the wall along their path. Another flash of light, and a dragon unwound its slender, scaly, luminescent body and let out a roar of bright light. A vixen stepped forth next, followed by a trail of wide-eyed, bushy-tailed kits. The ethereal beasts swam and swooped and frolicked, filling the basement with the radiant warmth of their magic. Then, when they had their fill of their games, and it was time for them to head back home, they returned to Hachiman, disappearing back to wherever they had come from, sucked through the eyes of their master. The blue glow in Hachiman's eyes was a sure sign the two samurai had made it through to the other side of the out beyond, to Shima Godetsusha, the island of usurpers. What happened next, however, depended entirely on their ability to utilize everything he had taught them over their hard years of study and training. We're going to the island now. Stars and night, a whole galaxy of possibilities stretched out across a place in between islands, a place called Out Beyond, where time moved too fast to truly appreciate the spectacle. At its heart, one star shined the brightest, a beacon, a dread, a place wholly detached from the samurai's own island of existence, but impossibly interwoven with its fate. Shima Godetsusha, the island of usurpers. Don't mind the coughing. Ronald blinked away the brightness seared into his vision from that star. Vertigo threatened, and his reality ebbed around him. He felt almost as if he were a newborn again, breaking from an egg and dripping through the cracks between his world and the other. Then, as the swift soaring through the clouds, he saw Shima Godetsusha in all of its verdant splendor, and it stole his breath from his lungs. From such a great height, the island was a crescent moon swallowing the emerald disk of the sun. It was surrounded, as far as the eagle's eyes could see, with peaceful, crystal clear waves that flowed from high tide to low through its epicenter. A smoldering volcano that reached for the stars. Ho Musubi made rock and ash, sharp, jagged, alive with broiling fire and black ash. Ronald dove as the swift breaking for a swarm of insects, and Shimagota-susha's inner workings became clear, its emerald forests, its spine of white-capped mountains, its smatterings of cherry trees, falls of blue water and white spray, and plains of wheat and rice. It was resplendent, an endless and otherworldly bountiful place, unlike any he could have ever imagined. It was a natural wonder keeping Earth, as it had become to known by the short-lived denizens of the mortal island, on the brink of utter and unrelenting destruction. That's not a word. Destruction. Closer still, Ronald could see himself, crouched side by side with his brother Hiro. They were clad in full samurai armor and hiding precariously behind a fallen black pine. Behind, the forest's thickness choked the sun, its ancient shadows stretching down the hillside like grasping fingers. In front, gray smoke curled from hundreds of campfires, banners fluttered in the cool breeze, and the forest wept where it had succumbed to axe and saw. Compared to that rest of the island, the crescent's northernmost tip was reduced to a desolate waste where hordes of soldiers, human and otherwise, leached what little life remained. Ronald collided with his body, and his breath was sucked from his lungs and spilled upon the dirt and rocks. He sucked in deeply, and all within sight was pulled towards him for an instant before snapping back into place like a rubber band released from tension. Have you ever seen such destruction? Huh? The words sounded distant, booming. Ronald blinked away his blurred vision and met his brother's eyes. Have you ever seen such destruction? Hero repeated. Unable to find a worthy response, Ronald shook his head and tightened his grip around his longsword. He couldn't understand how his brother was so composed after embarking on such a jarring transition between islands. It was both their first times, and it had nearly stripped Ronald of his sanity. Yet there Hero was, poised and stoic as always, his eyes on the horizon. Easy, brother. Hero placed a reassuring hand on Ronald's shoulders. We are here as scouts only. There will come a time when we bring Akuma Araki to justice, and I plan to be there with you by my side for her execution. But today we seek information. Tomorrow, retribution. Far to the south, Simagoto Shusha's crimson sun began its final rotation beyond the horizon. A pale pink light spread across the sprawling camp. As the sun crested, light gray fell over the world, then blackness, save the twinkle of 1,000,000,000,000 distant stars. A reflection of the out beyond projected on the sky as far as the eye could see. It seems Tsukuyomi has abandoned this place, Ronald observed, gazing up into the moonless night sky. He nodded towards the empty place where the moon should have been. Hiro grunted in agreement. He is repulsed by Akuma Araki's transgressions. Then he indicated to the mass of war tents stretched out before them. It's time. Follow close and stay alert. Her warriors have had their fill of sake and more tonight, but we must remain vigilant. We cannot allow them knowledge of our presence. There's more at stake on this mission than our official induction into the order. I understand. Good. Akuma Araki stands among her soldiers on feast nights. Her tent should be empty. Do you remember your role? Ronald nodded. Stand watch while you look for anything useful. Ledgers, maps, troop counts, official degrees. Aye, and anything with the Akuma Araki seal to prove the order insight into her plans. To provide the order insight into her plans. Hiro extended his arm, and Ronald grabbed his wrist. May the wind be at your back. And your sword at your front, Ronald said, reciting the second part of one of the Order's customary battle mantras. Their initiation rite was simple. Infiltrate Akuma Araki's war camp, acquire proof of her plans to traverse between islands and invade Earth, and escape without being seen. If they could accomplish those three things, they would be official members of their father's lifelong clan, the Order of the Golden Banzai, a mysterious and secretive group of samurai sworn to protect humanity from the countless dangers found on other islands. They moved like shadows through the camp, stepping carefully and silently around sleeping bodies, staying away from dying embers despite the night's bitter cold nagging at their bones. Hiro navigated the haphazard labyrinthine camp as if he'd been there before, and Ronald struggled to keep pace with his brother. Hiro raised his fist and came to an abrupt stop. They slipped into cover behind a tent. 2 guards, tall men with wobbling gaits and nasty body odors, staggered past. They were talking among themselves about women and conquest as if they were far across the camp from one another. Hiro stared into Ronald's eyes, fist still raised, never blinking once. He stood like a statue until the drunken guards were beyond earshot. With a subtle nod, they headed deeper into the camp towards their target, Akuma Araki's general's circle. They came to her tent. It was 4 times the size of the others, reinforced with sturdy rods of reeds and adorned with decorative symbols, representing the various armies and races pledged to her cause. A makeshift path lined the torches and flags led from a clearing to her tent's entrance flap. Without a word, Hiro ducked inside. Ronald hid in a darkened corner where he could safely watch for approaching enemies. The night was so quiet, Ronald could hear crickets chirping, the gentle breeze rustling fabric, and countless logs crackling in countless fires. The camp's song lulled him into a false sense of security, and his mind drifted to better places, warmer places. He saw the warrior's dancing shadow first, stretching and reaching towards Ronald as he appeared from the opposite side of the tent. Ronald, as the swift warning of the kestrel's approach, whistled into the night. But his warning came too little, too late, as the barrel-chested, unarmored man twice Ronald's size turned the corner, nearly crashing into him. Huh? Drunk and stupid, the man froze with a perplexed look on his face. He managed to recover his senses just as Ronald buried his short sword into his gut. What the? The man gurgled a wet plea as he grabbed the handle of Ronald's wakizashi, but he had no strength left to push against it as it slipped deeper into his body. I'm so sorry, Ronald whispered, hands trembling. Their eyes locked, the man's bloodshot and bulging. His was the first life Ronald had taken, and even in that briefest of moments, Ronald realized the imprint of his dying, slack face would forever be ingrained in his memory. A scar ran the length of the man's chin. His blue, beady eyes were lost in a spiderweb of veins. His nose, with a slight bend to the left, flared and ran red with blood. A horn sounded nearby, drowning out the man's dying, final desperate words, and Ronald cringed as his limp body slid to the dirt. All around Akuma's circle, men and women were grumbling and rising groggily from their sleep. Another horn sounded further off, then another and another, In a short time, the entire camp was alerted to the intruder's presence. Ronald called out to Hero again as he wiped his sword clean on the grass. Psst, he hissed, it's time to go. There was rustling inside the tent, and Hero poked through its flaps, a bundle of scrolls fastened to his belt opposite his swords. What did you do? He noticed the body and clicked his teeth. Oh, I see. The whole camp's waking up. We have to go, now. Hero slid his long sword smoothly from its sheath and gripped it firmly in both hands. To Ronald, Hero never looked more like a warrior than in that moment, and he never felt less like one. We move fast, stick to the shadows. Right, shadows. Avoid direct fights. If you find yourself in an unavoidable confrontation, Hero paused, glanced at the corpse again, and shook his head, a cheeky smile threatening the corner of his lip. Well, you know what to do. Strike first. Strike fast. Never let an opponent take your measure. If possible, don't even allow them to draw their sword. An early lesson from Daichi. Learned the hard way with plenty of flat, side-shaped welts and minor flesh wounds. A lesson taught again and again until both boys would never forget. A hard, often brutal reminder to Ronald that their father cared more about their training and their so-called greater purpose than their own personal health and well-being. They wove between tents and campfires, latrines and sleep sacks, careful to choose separate paths without losing track of each other's whereabouts. If the soldiers hadn't been drink weary and feast full from earlier in the evening, Ronald and Hero would have been in quite the impossible predicament. As it was, most of the soldiers were still groggy enough to sneak past with little trouble. One, however, clad in thick hide and wielding an axe the size of a small child, moved to intercept Hero. He swung the axe in a lazy arc at an angle that would surely cleave the young samurai in two, but Hero reacted too fast for the warrior's half-hearted attempt. Mid-stride, he pivoted and twisted his body to one side, and Ronald watched, breath held, as the axe struck harmlessly in the dirt behind his brother. When the tide of battle shifts, seize the advantage. In a duel, mercy is for the dead. Ronald pictured Daichi's grim face leering over him, felt the broken wrist he'd been dealt by his father, and heard the blood pumping behind his ears as he struggled to regain his wits. All the while, the old man laughed as if taking immense pleasure in beating his boys. Hero ducked as the soldier ripped the axe free and its sharp edge flew over his head. He snapped upward like a spring, landing face to face with his attacker, shoulders heaving from exertion. But beyond a few heavy breaths, he stood tall, a stoic visage of honed battle prowess. The axe dropped from the soldier's clutches with a thud, and he dropped to his knees, a red gash forming from his temple to the top of his ribs. As far as Ronald knew, that had also been Hero's first time taking a life. He wondered how his brother handled death, about what was going through his head as he processed his kill. Would the soldier's face forever haunt Hero too? But he didn't have long to wonder. A volley of arrows whistled by, planting feathers in the dirt at his feet. One nicked his shoulder piece, another ricocheted off his face mask, breaking it near his jawline. Sharp ceramic bit into his skin, and the taste of fresh blood filled his mouth. He found Hero, who was using the dead man as a pincushion, and nodded towards the dark hillside. Let's go, he mouthed, stripping off pieces of his broken mask. They didn't get far before two demonic-looking monstrosities tore through a cluster of tents to block their escape. Oni, by the look of them. Ugly SOBs with reddish skin, twisted horns, and sharp teeth like bent rebar. Their smell was part sulfur, part bleach. One wielded a club bigger than Ronald and studded with rusty spikes. The other brandished a katana twice as long as Ronald's own, its blade jagged with deep nicks from countless places where steel met steel. Ronald gulped. His heart drummed in his chest, palms sweaty, his muscles aching. He'd never been more afraid in his life, other than maybe the first time he managed to disappoint Daichi. But then there was Hero standing tall, sword tip pointed directly at the Oni, knees bent slightly, always ready, always confident, everything Ronald only wished he could be. Which one do you want? Hero asked. I'll take... Ronald stuttered. He didn't want either of them. He wanted to be far away from this awful place, from these giant demons intent on taking his life. He exhaled and fought against a wave of nausea threatening to overtake him. I'll take clubs, I guess. By the way his eyes lit up, Hero was grinning, actually smiling. They're faster than they looked. Weak at the heels. Fast. Got it. Heels. No problem. Go for the tendons. Never move in the same direction. We'll be okay. You'll be okay. Hero charged. Ronald followed closely behind. He feinted to the Oni's right, and the demon raised its club to smash him to pulp before the fight could even start. As the club fell, towards him, Ronald dug his left foot into the dirt and propelled himself in the opposite direction. The Oni watched helpfully as its club slammed into nothing. The ground shook like an earthquake, nearly knocking the young samurai off balance. Ronald's momentum took him too far beneath the demon's wide stance to strike effectively with his longsword. So close he could see the monster's bulging muscles, throbbing veins, smell its awful sulfur and bleach stench. He twisted at the hips, reached for his wakizashi with his offhand, and uncoiled like a viper, slicing a deep gash into the underside of the Oni's leg. It let out a terrible roar and staggered, crashing into the other. Ronald winced as he watched Hero squeeze free from between the two hulking bodies as they slammed together with an audible thump. With the Oni still off balance, Ronald and Hero pressed their attacks. Their strikes and slashes were coordinated, a display that would have made their father proud, and before the demons had a chance to recover and mount a proper defense, they were splayed on top of one another in a heap of shredded red flesh. Ronald and Hero shuffled their feet for a moment and laughed nervously. Ronald couldn't quite convince himself that the fight had actually been so easy, but it had. They'd done it. They'd won. They'd survived. Are they dead? Like, for real? Hero kicked the sole of the closest Oni's foot. No reaction. They seem to be. Yeah. He kicked it again for good measure. Dead is dead, at least. Ronald laughed louder now, almost delirious, and didn't stop until he started coughing. Hero joined in too. Shit, Ronald said. We just killed demons. Actual freaking monsters. Yeah. This time it was Hero who seemed to be at a loss for words. We sure did, didn't we? The brothers embraced, patting each other on the back, and then held each other at arm's length. I'm proud of you, Ronald. For real, man. I wasn't sure you had it in you, but you just slayed a real-life frickin' Oni. Absolutely legendary. Ronald was about to return the compliment when his attention was severed by an explosive thwang, louder than if Ho Musubi itself had erupted. His ears rang, and all the commotion of the stirring camp sounded like distant, muffled echoes. Dizziness threatened to overtake him, and suddenly everything around him became distant, hollow. Ronald forgot where he was, what was at stake, who his own brother was. Nothing made sense, and time oozed to a complete stop as he numbly fumbled for some semblance of sanity. Sorry, I'm not used to talking this long. My voice is kind of going. Hero's eyes widened, bulging almost like the man whom Ronald had killed. His grip on Ronald's arm was vice-like, and his lips quivered. Hero? What's wrong? Ronald asked, but he couldn't hear his brother's response, if there had been a response, over the screaming within his head. He looked down and saw the arrow, its shaft as thick as his wrist, its tip barbed and wicked sharp. It had pierced clean through Hero's back, splitting his ribs above his sternum. Hero reached for the barb, but he couldn't muster enough strength to wrap his fingers around it. Over his shoulder, Akuma Araki stood over 8 feet tall, holding an elegant Yumi nearly the same size. A horde of samurai clad in lord's armor flanked her, each wielding a long, cruel-looking tachi. The general's face mask resembled a twisted, grotesque demon that made the Oni look almost handsome. Her samurai wore similar faces, each unique, each leaving a lasting, nightmarish impression on him. Hero fell forward, his dead weight bringing Ronald to his knees. Ronald cradled his brother, tears streaking down his cheeks behind what was left of his mask. Take these, blood spurted out of Hero's mouth as he untied the scrolls from his belt. Get them back home, he coughed until he choked. But I can't leave you. Go, Hero grasped Ronald's collar. Now, I love you, Ronald. Little did Ronald know that would be the last time anyone told him that for a long, long time. Ronald dropped his brother's body and turned to run. What happened next was a blur of motion and sound and confusion. His brother's final words, I love you, followed by a war cry of a dozen overlapping voices. Samurai charging, Akuma standing with her bow resting before her. Calm, patient, assured. He snagged his foot on a sleeping sack. He tripped over a horse trough. He grappled with a man not much older than himself, stabbing over and over with his short sword, scrambling up a hill. The hill they came down from originally, he hoped. Together, 2 Hashimoto sons. There was another thwang, less explosive but equally threatening. An arrow lodged in a rocky outcrop some 50 feet above him, dislodging fist and skull-sized rocks that cascaded on him. He covered his head and neck with one arm, clung to whatever brush he could with the other. and dug at the soil with fast pumping feet. Rocks pummeled him from every angle, denting his armor's plates and splitting its wrappings. As he desperately clawed through the rock slide, Daichi's words came unabated once more. When facing overwhelming odds or challenging an opponent who far outclasses you, do not run. Running is a coward's game. Instead, smile at death and invite her for tea. Treat her with the respect you would offer an honored guest. The old man's words had been almost funny at the time, the closest thing to a joke Ronald's father ever told. Now, with rocks raining down on him, arrows the size of saplings aimed at him, and his brother still down there, lost to the mortal world forever, there was nothing funny about them. Death was suddenly far too real and far too close. And Ronald was a coward. He was not ready to die yet. He'd met death just moments before. She twice stared him in the face, and he wasn't ready to invite her over for a third visit. A large rock, a boulder really, slammed into his shoulder, the same shoulder the arrow had weakened before. The plate shattered and his arm went numb, and in the short seconds he lost his grip strength, the scrolls fell loose, skittering out of sight down the hillside. He cursed his ill fortune, but only for a moment. Compared to Hero's death, the loss of some stupid scrolls seemed insignificant. Why should he care anyway? The moment his brother died, he had already decided never to return to this terrible place, to leave all the violence behind, to forget the order ever existed. A third arrow sunk to its feathers beside him, not 6 inches from his face. He summoned what little strength he had left and continued his scramble upward, a task made much easier now that he had two free hands to use. As he stumbled his way into the forest, distant shouts became quiet whispers. Then there was silence, loud, oppressive silence. He dropped to his knees, tore off his helmet, and screamed. The canopy swirled around him faster and faster until he was too dizzy to stand upright. He fell to the dirt, and everything went black. Minutes later, or it could have been hours, Hachiman's glowing blue eyes turned red. A crackling of powerful energy exploded from the shrine, sending a scattering of ethereal creatures to every corner of the basement and knocking the old man against the wall, nearly sending him down the stairs. Heat followed in waves. The shrine's once reassuring warmth burned hotter than embers, and when the stairway reopened, his worst fear was confirmed. One stoop-shouldered samurai emerged, armor disheveled, helmet cracked across his faceplate. There was a nasty gash across his face from jaw to upper lip, and what little intact armor he had left was caked in mud and chunks of grass. Ronald stumbled into the basement, falling to the floor as the shrine began to close behind him. Father, I... The old man frowned and shook his head. A twitch of emotion crossed his face. Sorrow? Disappointment? Anger? Ronald scampered through the dirt and threw his arms around the older man's legs. The man growled, kicked his legs free from the warrior's embrace, and planted one sandaled foot firmly between his eyes, sending him tumbling backwards in a heap. Oda-san. The old man took each sure-footed step towards the fallen samurai slowly. His shadow hovered over the limp warrior, a specter come to take the samurai away, and the old man leaned towards him and snatched the family crest dangling beneath his chest plate. The Onaga Domo, 3 swirling tails with sharp, blending points at their ends. Papa, please. You are no son of mine, the old man said before disappearing upstairs. The crest clattered across the basement floor, a trail of dust following in its wake. Ronald, left with the solitude of his thoughts, slumped against the wall. The shrine flickered red once more, and the basement fell silent, dark, save the would-be warrior's deep breaths and fast-beating heart. He stared at the crest lying in the dirt until everything else around him faded to blurry oblivion. The silhouette of Hero's dying face was the last image Ronald saw before slipping into unconsciousness. So that was chapter 1 of Ronald the Ronin. Things went very badly for him, and that moment with him and Hero is the trauma that he tries to overcome and to a certain extent fails, and to a certain extent succeeds as the book pans out. Again, I hope you really enjoyed the reading today. It's not something I usually do, so it's a little bit out of my comfort zone. I'm not a voice actor by any means, so I appreciate you listening either way, and I appreciate if you would check out the rest of the book if you like what you've heard today. All right, guys, I will talk to you later. Let's enjoy this journey with Ronald together. Peace.